What up? It's your boy T-Bear here in Reaction and Days Wrestling. It's a makeup for Wrestling Wednesdays. You know, I'm doing some videos for makeups for some of the days. And this one is we're going to take a look at in honor of this weekend's historical pay-per-view from Impact Wrestling, Bound for Glory. It's obvious. We're gonna check out a video about the two of this year's inductees to Impact Wrestling Hall of Fame, Mike Tenay and the late great Don West. Though this one we're gonna check out from Color Heart of Wrestling. 10 wrestlers who had only one TNA match as well too. You know, recently TNA as we're experienced a 1,000 episode as well too, and we are experiencing 20 plus years of Impact Wrestling. So without further ado, let's take a look through and check out TNA wrestling. 10 wrestlers who probably was known in all wrestling world only did one match at TNA as like probably a one-off, a part of a storyline, etc. Let's get it.
For much of its 20-plus year existence, TNA/Impact Wrestling has been a good option for pro wrestlers looking to earn a living in the business. Many sports entertainers have had solid careers with the resilient promotion, some across multiple spells. Others, however, were gone before you could say, "Hey Dixie, should I be worried about this check bouncing?" I'm Adam Pacini from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 10 wrestlers who only had one TNA match.
Here we go.
Join us. Number 10, Canyon.
Okay.
It's often said that Chris Canyon never got a fair shake of the stick during his WWE run. The former WCW United States champion was pummeled by the Brothers of Destruction, suffered a major knee injury, and then, when he came back, was pummeled by The Undertaker some more before essentially being jobbed out on the way to his inevitable release. TNA seemed like a good fit for the innovator of offense to pick up the pieces and remind the world just what he was capable of. Originally earmarked as Raven's opponent for 2005's Genesis pay-per-view, Canyon was instead replaced by PJ Polacco, aka Just Incredible, and his debut was pushed back a month due to what TNA felt were unreasonable monetary demands. When he did come in for Turning Point, there was a battle over what name he would use, with the two sides settling on the exceptionally creative Chris K. Where do they come up with this stuff? In any event, the match was short and unmemorable and was essentially there to continue the ongoing story between Raven and Larry Zbyszko, with Canyon unfortunately rendered an afterthought. Number 9, Lex Luger.
Really?
2003 was not a good time in the life of Lex Luger. The total package had not wrestled much at all following the sale of WCW to WWE, as his personal demons took hold of him. The nadir for Lex was the accidental overdose death of his girlfriend, Elizabeth Hewlett, aka Miss Elizabeth, in the townhouse the couple shared on May 1st of that year. In his first match since Liz's death, Luger worked the main event of TNA's 70th weekly pay-per-view. The opportunity came about thanks to Sting, Lex's longtime friend and traveling partner. It was the face-painted icon that requested Luger be brought in for the match, which saw Lex tag with Jeff Jarrett in a losing effort against Sting and AJ Styles. Sting wanted Luger in so badly that he arranged his flight from Los Angeles to Atlanta instead of Nashville so he could pick Luger up and drive him to the show. Regrettably, a few wrestlers were reportedly pulled from the show due to the expense of bringing the former WCW World Champion in. Though he never wrestled for TNA again, Luger got some revenge on the Phenomenal One by putting him through a table a few months later. Number 8, Bob Holly. By the time he was released by WWE in January of 2009, Bob Holly was one of the most tenured members of the roster. The former tag team champion had been there for 15 years, evolving from a sparky stock car racer to a grizzled veteran and locker room gatekeeper. Post-WWE, Holly opted to work for select US indies and a few international outfits. He didn't resurface on mainstream television until he showed up at TNA's Hardcore Justice 2 pay-per-view in July of 2013, though the event was actually taped in March. Brought in because he was, hardcore and the show was, hardcore, the then 50-year-old was the surprise partner of James Storm and Magnus in a 6-man elimination tag match against the Aces and Eights trio of Nux, DOC, and Wes Briscoe. His squad may have...
One of his part of that one night only. Do you remember for a while they was at like a one night only pay-per-view for developing and the storylines? It was probably like, the theme of it as well too. One for the Divas, one for Hardcore Justice. I wonder if it was one night only pay-per-view.
Being victorious, but Holly was the first member of the team eliminated after
Yeah,
he
'cause I'm looking at
himself had
like,
eliminated
the
Nux.
graphic, that's for the
It was
one
a
night only
one-shot deal for Bob Core, who later professed to be a fan of the TNA product and praised
Yeah, for a while I think they did like that. They had like a lot of like ex members of S company that never wrestled TNA before wrestling and like a one night only pay-per-views events they used to have, and this was one of them.
Magnus is someone with a great mind for the business and a bright
AKA now that Nick Aldis, the news GM for SmackDown.
future ahead of him. Number 7, Charlie Haas.
My
When
dad
Charlie Haas was
actually
released by
remember Charlie Haas
WWE in the
wrestling.
summer of 2005, the general assumption was that he would make TNA his new home.
I actually
He had
remember
made it
him
well
on
known in the
TNA.
aftermath of being let go that he wanted to work there eventually, going so far as to name-check Christopher Daniels and AJ Styles as talents that he wanted to wrestle. It didn't end up happening, and Haas would in fact return to WWE within the year, even if Charlie's then-wife Jackie did join Dixie Carter's company. Charlie would get there in the end too, mind, just a lot later than he probably thought. In January of 2022, Haas made his Impact Wrestling debut, challenging his fellow amateur standout Josh Alexander. The next week, Haas wrestled his first televised match in an age and put forth a good showing against his younger opponents, demonstrating that he hadn't really missed a beat in his time away from the business despite suffering a concussion during the contest. Charlie praised Alexander after and endorsed him as the real
I wonder why he seemed like he was out of it a little bit in that match. Wow.
deal, while expressing his desire to work with Impact again, either as an in-ring performer or behind-the-scenes agent.
I mean, Shelton Benjamin is a free agent now. You could have the world greatest tag team or wherever they would call them and have appearance on Impact Wrestling. That'd be pretty cool. I mean, you never know.
Number 6, Test.
Yup.
Test's
Hear
second
about
run in
this.
WWE was sadly less than memorable as he bounced around on the company's version of ECW for a few months before failing a wellness policy test and getting wished well in his future endeavors soon after. About 6 months after leaving WWE, Test, as the Punisher Andrew Martin, strode into the Impact Zone looking somehow even more massive and aligned himself with Sting and Abyss by helping them defeat AJ Styles and Christian Cage in a ladder match. 10 days later, at the Hard Justice pay-per-view, Martin teamed with the Monster and the Icon to beat Styles, Cage, and Tomko in the humdrum Doomsday Chamber of Blood match. And that's, as they say, was that, as Andrew Martin once again disappeared from public view. His TNA appearances would be his last major ones before his untimely death in March of 2009. As an aside, the former Intercontinental Champion had only been drafted in by TNA when Rikishi's asking price had proved to be too high. 10 grand per stink face, or so they tell me. Number 5, China. When China left WWE in 2001, there weren't many, or really any, alternative companies for her to work for, and Joanie Lura seemed more interested in pursuing acting and modeling work anyway.
And some other kind of work as well too. If you know, you know. RIP China.
She did decide to re-enter the squared circle in the fall of 2002. It wasn't for TNA, but rather New Japan Pro Wrestling, where the ninth wonder of the world had an unlikely run filled with uncommon intergender matches. When her dalliance with the King of Sports came to an end, so too did
no lie, she look kind of good, the blonde right there.
China's professional wrestling run. Well, for almost a decade anyway, during which time she battled various well-documented personal issues. Then, seemingly out of the blue in May of 2011, TNA brought her in as part of the ongoing rivalry between Kurt Angle, his ex-wife Karen, and her new fella, Jeff Jarrett. At Sacrifice, China teamed with the Olympic hero to defeat the Jarretts in a mixed tag match. It was her first match for TNA, and as it turned out, her last match ever, as she got to end her career with her head held high and the spotlight shining on her. Number 4, Jim Neidhart and Tatanka. The cocky young upstart challenges and beats various industry legends is a professional wrestling storyline we've seen many times over the years. It helped launch Randy Orton into the stratosphere, it helped keep Rob Conway employed for a little while longer, and it helped Jay Lethal look like a giant dork for a brief period in late 2009. And that's simply because, rather than call out and then defeat faces from the past, Black Machismo actually did the honors for Jim Neidhart and then Tatanka. The Anvil, who looked like he had swallowed one on the way to the ring, looked really ropey for the short time he was out there before putting Lethal away with a power slam.
You know what?
Tatanka took
I think I do remember this because I did
little longer to get the job done, but also managed to pin Jay after hitting him with the papoose to go. Alright, his Samoan drop was actually called the end of the trail or something, but if I'm going to get an opportunity to use one of Bobby Heenan's old jokes, then you know I'm going to take it. Also, notice how Jake Roberts, Kamala, and Coco Beware didn't answer Lethal's open challenge? That's because they were guests at his 2008 wedding to SoCal Val. It's called good storytelling, folks. Number 3, the Harp Throbs. You remember the Harp Throbs, don't you? That ripped WWE tag team who covered themselves in baby oil and danced like Chippendales on the way to the ring? Now, please don't get confused with the Dicks. Chad and James were members of the SmackDown roster.
Crash, man, what a time we had during the peak of the Ruthless Aggression era. We had like the Dicks, the Harp Throbs, the lesbians.
While Antonio and Romeo were on Raw. I guess each brand had to have one of whatever they were. Anyway, the Harp Throbs naturally looked to TNA for viable employment once they'd been pink-slipped by WWE. After showing up backstage at Final Resolution 2007 and subsequently working a tryout match, the Harp Throbs were given their big shot at Destination X. Introduced by Christy Hemme as the rebadged Heartbreakers, the team attempted to take down the chauvinistic Voodoo Kin Mafia on her behalf. They failed, naturally, and what's worse is they failed to make an impression on anyone with their performance, as the match was positively rotten and seemed solely to exist for spots involving Christy and Kip James. Classic spots like, you know, the I'll pull my cup out and rub it in your face spot. It's kind of telling that the Basham brothers, Christy's next hand-picked opponents, were viewed as a major upgrade on this pair of throbbers. Number 2, Bart Gunn. Contrary to popular belief, Bart Gunn did in fact have a successful professional wrestling career after he was butterbeaned into oblivion at WrestleMania 15. Rebuilding his reputation overseas, Gunn, under the name Mike Barton, became a foreign star for All Japan and then New Japan. One of the former WWE Tag Team Champions' few matches back on home soil took place in the Tennessee State Fairgrounds in Nashville for TNA. On April 9th, 2003, Barton worked the company's 40th pay-per-view, taking on Perry Saturn in a battle of the legit hard cases. Built up with a post-match angle the week prior, this battle of the New Japan Gaijin was surprisingly brutal and bloody. Pounding each other with stiff strikes and surly suplexes, Big Pez and the Brawl for All champions simply went ham in a match that very much felt like it had been inspired by the Japanese strong style. In the end, Saturn got the win by submission after Barton sold like he had broken his hand due to the repeated punches. If his commitments in the Far East didn't take priority, you would think that Barton would have been good value as a TNA regular in this era based on his performance here.
So pretty much,
Number 1,
he can't attend TNA before Billy Gunn.
Randy Savage.
Yup.
In TNA's early years, they were constantly looking for that star or group of stars that would give them immediate credibility with the wider viewing public. That's partly why they went after the larger-than-life likes of Goldberg, Brock Lesnar, and The Ultimate Warrior. None of those would make the jump, but the Jarretts did manage to convince the reclusive, ostensibly retired Randy Savage to come in for a series of matches. Unfortunately, the Macho Man's heart, not to mention the rest of his battered body, was no longer in it, and Savage only managed the one match for TNA, and just barely at that. In Randy's last ever in-ring appearance, he teamed with Jeff Hardy and AJ Styles to take on the Kings of Wrestling, Double J and the jumpsuit-wearing Kevin Nash and Scott Hall at Turning Point 2004. Appearing only at the conclusion of the contest, Savage could only really muster a so-called hot tag, cleaning house and applying a sleeper before blocking a sunset flip and pinning the then NWA World's Heavyweight Champion with a punch to the face. A singles pay-per-view main event over the title failed to materialize, as Randy simply called it a day and retreated from public life.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I remember that moment that I hear about. I remember more about Randy Savage being part as well too. So most of my different remember ones by like replay or store or looking up as well too. Like I do remember Tess being part of it. I think I somewhat remember Lex Luger after looking at it. But the other ones I definitely did not remember was of course I know Charles that was recent. And what was the other one? China, of course. I remember I was watching it during that time. Now I think I seldom remember the one with Jim Neidhart and Tatanka, and I barely watched. I was barely watching WWE at the time. One day, the Harp Throbs and Dix was on at WWE as well too. I remember hearing about because I was following online, a lot to keep up with characters, but still. And this Bart was way before I was even thought about TNA. But definitely remember Randy Savage by highlights as well too, and Chris Candy didn't know about as well too. Like the Hardcore Holly, I think was probably part of that. For a while they had his one night only pay per views they had going on as well too. And that's how he got in. But other than that, this was a good video to check out as well too. To get some wild moments of like one time wrestling matches for TNA. Like I said, Crowley Horsey, if he does come back, I mean, Sheldon Bisman is a free agent. I mean, who knows? But other than that, if you like my reaction, like, share, subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's your boy T-Bird signing off. One love.